morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're tuned in to World DNA. I'm Jyotsna Kumar.
I'm Kripa, and on the show today, we break down the rising tension in West Asia as U.S. President Donald Trump signals that Washington may not need a deal with Iran to deal with Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, while acknowledging that Iran is no easy target like Venezuela.
We'll get more details on that. On the other hand, from West Asia, the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire effort is on shaky ground as Israeli strikes intensify across Lebanon. Hezbollah has rejected the proposal deal outright, demanding a full Israeli withdrawal and vowing to keep fighting as long as Israeli troops remain on Lebanese soil. We'll get to this and more on the show. Let's begin with the headlines.
Donald Trump praises Prime Minister Modi, calling him a good friend and expressing confidence that the US and India will reach a trade agreement. Highlights their strong personal relationship while speaking to reporters at the White House.
Putin says U.S. attempts to pressure PM Modi over India's ties with Russia would be ineffective and harmful. Emphasizes that Moscow views New Delhi as trusted partner and cooperation between India and other countries does not threaten bilateral ties.
Donald Trump says the U.S. does not need a deal with Iran to obtain its stockpile of enriched uranium. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, he claims Washington could retrieve it whenever it wanted and that Iran would likely be unable to stop it.
Marco Rubio condemns what he describes as Iran's outrageous attack on Kuwait International Airport, which killed one person and injured dozens. In a meeting with Kuwaiti Foreign Minister, expresses condolences to the victims.
U.S. House of Representatives approve aid to Ukraine and new sanctions on Russia by a vote of 226-195. The bill advances despite opposition from President Trump, with a few Republicans joining Democrats to push through it.
Volodymyr Zelensky proposes a direct meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in an open letter as Ukraine and Russia continue to exchange attacks. U.S. President Donald Trump welcomes the idea of a face-to-face meeting.
At least 8 people killed and 8 others wounded in Israeli airstrikes in eastern and southern Lebanon. The attacks occur a day after Lebanon and Israel agreed to a ceasefire plan for the conflict with Hezbollah.
Four LPG tanker trucks explode at a storage site in Mexico, causing a large fire and triggering a major emergency response. About 2,000 people evacuated from nearby homes, hospitals, and schools. Authorities report 3 injuries.
Asian markets stumbled on Friday, with South Korea's Kospi plunging more than 4% as tech stocks led losses. The sell-off followed overnight weakness in U.S. chip makers as investors rotated out of AI stocks and into broader sectors amid renewed West Asia tensions.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Washington does not need a deal with Iran to get enriched uranium from the country.
Trump also added that the U.S. will win the war one way or the other.
We would have been, Peter, we would have been there for a period of from a week to 2 weeks. We would have gotten it. But I said, I don't like the idea of that. All of a sudden, they, pinpoint, they still had missiles left. That means they would pinpoint you and just keep lobbing them in until one gets through, and people would have gotten killed. So I didn't like it. We could get it right now. I don't think they could stop us if we wanted, but there's no reason to. It's entombed. You use a good word. It's entombed.
He also added that if Washington and Tehran reached a deal, it was possible that he would meet Iran's Supreme Leader, Moshtaba Khamenei.
And he's heard you want to meet with the new Ayatollah, the new Supreme Leader.
I don't want to meet, but if I did meet, I'd be honored to meet him. I'd like to see if we make a deal. But if we make a deal, it's possible that I would meet him. I'd be okay with it.
Trump also conceded that Iran is not Venezuela, where the U.S. military could simply go in, seize Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium and come back. Trump said that the operation may need at least 2 weeks.
To get there, it's not like Venezuela. Like you go in, you're there for a matter of minutes, and you're out, and everybody's waving goodbye as you take off, and you brought the cargo back. This is different. You'd have to be there for 2 weeks. You'd need massive equipment. You'd have to airlift the equipment in. You're in a war zone.
Separately, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has condemned the attack on Kuwait airport this week as outrageous. The comments came during a meeting with Kuwaiti Foreign Minister Jarrah Jaber Al Ahmed Al Sabah in Washington.
With the war pushing the region on the edge, the U.S. government has now issued travel advisories for countries in the Gulf. According to the new directives, U.S. citizens have been asked to reconsider travel to Bahrain, Israel, West Bank, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Further, U.S. citizens have been asked to not travel to Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and Yemen.
Meanwhile, U.S. Army Central or ARCENT and 3rd Army conducted a change of command ceremony in West Asia. Lieutenant General Patrick Frank, who took command of ARCENT in July 2022, assumed the deputy commander role at CENTCOM.
Well, to discuss more on this, we are now being joined by Adrian Calamal live from New York. He's a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute, terrorism and West Asian scholar. Welcome to WION World as one, sir. We know that Trump said the U.S. could get Iran's enriched uranium right now without a deal. Then why negotiate at all?
Well, yeah, good morning to you. Great question. Yeah, why negotiate at all? I think what we're seeing is Trump is using strategic patience right now. I know with the Strait of Hormuz, there's been a lot of noise around that and how it's affecting the world economy. What people aren't seeing is what it's doing to the IRGC and their economy. They're not able to pay salaries of individuals, the repressive forces, those type of individuals. So, it's the whole idea and the notion of a deal. It was, I just never saw how it was going to come to pass, because Trump was very, firm that there will be no enrichment and no reprocessing. And the regime insisted that they had a right to enrich and reprocess. And Ali Khamenei, when he was still alive, believed that a nuclear weapon was critical to the survival of the regime. And I still believe that the remnants that are in power, specifically Mohsen Rezai, believe that a nuclear weapon is critical to the survival of the regime. So they're using strategic, tactical retreats to maintain their long-term strategic objectives. And I think Trump, this is a bit of gamesmanship here, and he's just kind of waiting it out and seeing what type of pressure can be played. Because part of Trump's policy has always been, it's been maximum pressure, and that's two elements to it. That's the kinetic kinetic, the military aspect, but it's also the economic part. And a lot of that economic part we're not seeing and what it's doing to the toll it's taken on the IRGC, their proxies, the money that they're able to push out and around the region.
And that being said, do you think that when Trump says have conceded that Iran is not Venezuela, and when he says that yes, it would take, the operation might take at least 2 weeks, do you see this as a plan going forward if at all a deal is not, it won't happen? Because we've clearly, as my colleague mentioned, well, why negotiate?
Yeah, Josna, that's another really great question. Is like how do you? There's a couple objectives here. There's Natanz, and in Natanz they have to worry about centrifuges there, so they have to destroy those. And if you look at the areas where they put Natanz, that's in a highly populated area. And then in Isfahan, that's where you have the buried highly enriched uranium, and that needs to be destroyed and likely destroyed on site, not lifted out. So what you would have to do is, if the regime is not willing to make a deal and is still aggressive, and you would have to put up multiple layers of force protection to bring in the mechanisms to destroy that material and or centrifuges on site. And that sounds like a really extremely risky operation. Whereas, I hate to say this, but I think the more reasonable approach is to look to further, put the economic isolation on the regime. Also, to maybe, look at the kinetic operations again, take care of some of the individuals that weren't taken care of before. When I say eliminated, such as Mohsen Rezai, who he's the longest standing IRGC commander, and as far as Mojtaba, I doubt he's even alive. It's the IRGC that's running the country right now.
All right, of course, we'll have to wait and see how that pans out for West Asia. It's not just that, we also have Israel-Lebanon, where Hezbollah has outright rejected the ceasefire. That also seems to be a very fragile ceasefire. But of course, we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
The fragile ceasefire plan between Israel and Lebanon is under threat as heavy fighting continues despite the diplomatic agreement.
A surge in Israeli airstrikes have now claimed dozens of lives across Lebanon, with Hezbollah rejecting the agreement outright. Smoke was seen rising above southern villages in Lebanon as Israeli forces carried out air attacks. Lebanon's health ministry reported that Israeli strikes in the south and east killed 8 people, including women and children. 5 people were killed in eastern Lebanon, while another attack on southern city of Tyre left 3 more dead.
Well, Hezbollah has rejected the proposal Israel-Lebanon ceasefire agreement, demanding a full withdrawal of Israeli troops. The group warned that its military operations will continue as long as Israeli forces maintained a presence inside the country.
Meanwhile, Israel has signaled that it is not prepared to alter its military posture. Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israeli troops would not withdraw from southern Lebanon and would continue operations against Hezbollah targets.
Now, residents in northern region expressed skepticism about the truce. Those living near the border said the Hezbollah needs to be completely wiped out.
I'll tell you, they say a ceasefire, but it's not a ceasefire. It's a ceasefire with fire. We're constantly receiving drones and all kinds of rockets. I actually live 300 meters from the border. I'm a resident of Shlomi. And what's happening is that we're locked up. Let's put it this way. We're living in fear all the time. We live from alarm to alarm. Sometimes there's not even an alarm.
We have to wipe out Hezbollah and put an end to the threat. And that's it. The ceasefire stuff is just a pause. In Arabic, they call it a hudna, which means it's a little break between wars.
Israeli forces also reported the death of an Israeli soldier in southern Lebanon, marking the first Israeli military fatality since the announcement of a new ceasefire initiative. According to the Israeli military, 21-year-old Captain Eitan Shmuel Lemberg was killed when Hezbollah fired a missile at an Israeli tank.
The ongoing conflict is also raising concerns about the safety of international peacekeepers. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the killing of a Serbian peacekeeper serving with the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL. The peacekeeper died from injuries sustained during mortar fire on a UN base. 2 other peacekeepers were wounded in the same attack.
Well, India has strongly condemned the attack on UN peacekeepers. In a statement issued by its permanent mission to the United Nations, India paid tribute to the fallen Serbian peacekeeper, wished a speedy recovery to those injured, and called for a thorough investigation to bring those responsible to justice. Well, shifting our focus to another war front, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has proposed a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin.
This is in a rare open letter to the Russian leader. The development came as Putin said that Moscow needed to strengthen its air defenses following a spate of Ukrainian attacks. Zelensky wrote that Ukraine is seeking to end the war with a face-to-face engagement between him and Putin. He proposed to set a clear date for one such meeting and assured that there would be complete ceasefire during the negotiations.
Zelensky published the letter a day after Ukrainian drones hit St. Petersburg as Putin's home city hosted a major international economic forum this week.
The Ukrainian leader has repeatedly called for a meeting with the Russian president, saying only face-to-face talks will yield an agreement on territory. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Russian president is aware of Zelensky's letter.
Well, speaking to the reporters in St. Petersburg, Peskov said that Putin would be briefed about the letter after end of Uzbek president's visit.
Yes, we saw it. He published it during an event with the president. The president hasn't had the opportunity to read it yet. I can say that it will be reported to the president after the end of the working part of the Uzbek president's visit.
While U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed optimism about the letter by Zelensky, Trump said that he is glad that both leaders were talking about meeting.
Well, I don't know. I'm glad that they're maybe talking about meeting. I think we had a lot to do with it. I know exactly what you're doing. But I think it would be great if they met. They should get it done.
On the other side, Russian President Vladimir Putin has indicated to make what he called, quote-unquote, some compromises for a peace deal with Ukraine. Speaking on the sidelines of Russia's annual economic forum, Putin said that Russia would defeat Ukraine on the battlefield if necessary, but added that he is ready to end the war via diplomacy and would honor the terms he had agreed with U.S. President Trump when both met at Alaska.
I would add this. We are absolutely ready and willing to reach an agreement with Ukraine through peaceful means, and on the basis we discussed at our meeting with President Trump in Anchorage. At that meeting, Russia was asked to consider certain compromises, and Russia is willing to accept the compromises we discussed in Anchorage. But the Ukrainian side must also agree to these compromises, and then the conflict will quickly come to its natural conclusion.
Putin noted that U.S. has switched its attention away from trying to end the Ukraine conflict since it launched its war against Iran. At the same time, he addressed the slew of air threats originating from Ukraine and stressed on the need to strengthen its air defenses.
Unfortunately, some of them do get through, but Russia has an air defense system. Yes, we must improve it. Yes, we must strengthen it. And we will do so.
Putin's statement came as action continued on the war front. On Thursday, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces issued a video showing what appeared to be a Ukrainian strike on a Russian patrol ship in Crimea and on the Panzer air defense system in the Kherson region of Russia-controlled Ukraine.
Amidst this, the U.S. House has passed a new bill that would aid Ukraine and sanction key segments of the Russian economy. The bill passed even after objections from Republican leaders who warned that it would undermine negotiations designed to achieve a comparable but stronger result. The unrest in Bolivia has now entered its second month with no clear indication that tensions are easing for President Rodrigo Paz.
Demonstrations, road blockades, and disruptions to basic supply chains continue across large parts of the country.
In the latest, police cleared community members who had seized an oil facility in Santa Cruz. Officers used tear gas to disperse protesters who occupied the site a day earlier and demanded Paz's resignation. The operation in the municipality of Santa Rosa del Sara left 4 people detained.
The protest movement has led to at least 90 roadblocks across 7 of Bolivia's 9 departments. According to the Bolivian Highway Administration, the Department of Cochabamba has been the most affected, with 32 blockade points recorded.
Attempting to contain the unrest, President Paz has moved to expand the military's role in quelling anti-government demonstrations. He said he has prepared a bill to empower the armed forces to tackle protests and strengthen the institutions.
Would like to note that, together with the armed forces, our national police and the ministers, we have submitted a bill. We have submitted a bill based on the principle of humanitarian action. All the efforts that our national police, our armed forces, and the government will make will be humanitarian actions aimed at changing this situation. This bill on regulations for states of emergency in the country has already been submitted to Parliament, and I hope it will be passed soon.
The crisis has worsened shortages of food, fuel, and other essentials. In La Paz on Wednesday, thousands queued for hours to buy subsidized chicken at 28 Bolivianos per kilogram. There were videos that show the civilians struggle amid the disruptions.
This is going to keep happening because the president isn't doing anything. He, on the other hand, is doing just fine because he gets a plate of meat every day. But poor families have nothing. It's a shame. It's a real shame that we're going through this situation. We Bolivians are starving to death.
President Paz took office just over 7 months ago after an election that ended 2 decades of left-wing rule. His government moved quickly to restore relations with the United States and introduced economic reforms. These reforms also included cuts to fuel subsidies intended to reduce fiscal pressure.
While those measures have faced strong opposition over the past month, protesters have called for his resignation. The administration was further destabilized this week after the resignations of the defense and education ministers.
Now, before we wrap up this segment of our bulletin, here's a quick look at the images drawing our attention around the world, leaving you with these visuals. Stay tuned to WION World is One. We'll be right back with World DNA.
It's turned out to be the most successful World Cup from the standpoint of what's happening.
The FIFA World Cup is being co-hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico and kicks off on June 11th. For the first time in history, the tournament expands to 48 teams playing a record 104 matches.
Get all the updates from the 2026 FIFA World Cup only on WION.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION. World is One. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching WION World is One with me, Josna Kumar and Kripa. Let's begin with the headlines.
Well, like you go in, you're there for a matter of minutes, and you're out. And everybody's waving goodbye as you take off. And you brought the cargo back. This is different.
Donald Trump says he considered launching a U.S. operation to retrieve Iran's enriched uranium, but ultimately rejected the idea. He stresses Iran is not like Venezuela, and uranium is heavily buried and difficult to access.
He's a good friend of mine. Get along great, and we're going to make a deal. We have a very good relationship.
Donald Trump praises PM Modi, calling him a good friend and expressing confidence that the U.S. and India will reach a trade agreement. Highlights their strong personal relationship while speaking to reporters at the White House.
Putin says U.S. attempts to pressure Prime Minister Modi over India's ties with Russia would be ineffective and harmful. Emphasizes that Moscow views New Delhi as trusted partner and cooperation between India and other countries does not threaten bilateral ties.
Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit North Korea from 8th of June to 9th at the invitation of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Chinese state media says this will be a visit aimed at strengthening bilateral ties between the two countries.
U.S. House of Representatives approve aid to Ukraine and new sanctions on Russia by a vote of 226 to 195. The bill advances despite opposition from President Trump, with a few Republicans joining Democrats to push it through.
Israeli military says an Israeli soldier killed in southern Lebanon after being hit by a missile fired by Hezbollah is the first Israeli fatality since a new ceasefire plan was announced. Incident occurs during cross-border fighting.
Colombia's President Gustavo Petro criticizes Donald Trump for endorsing hard-right presidential candidate Abelardo de la Espriella, accuses U.S. of supporting forces he claims are linked to narco-traffickers.
Four LPG tanker trucks explode at a storage site in Mexico, causing a large fire and triggering a major emergency response. About 2,000 people evacuated from nearby homes, hospitals, and schools. Authorities report 3 injuries.
Bitcoin is enduring its worst week in months as momentum fades and liquidity shifts away from crypto markets. Analysts say the pullback reflects cooling investor sentiment and a broader rotation into other asset classes amid uncertain risk appetite.
While the world's attention is focused on the war in Iran, Gaza continues to be ravaged by Israeli strikes.
In the latest, at least 11 Palestinians have been killed in strikes across Gaza. According to the Gaza Civil Defense Agency, 9 Palestinians were killed in strikes on apartments in the northwest and southwest of Gaza City. 2 others were killed in drone strikes in the southwest and the city center. Despite a ceasefire since October last year, Israeli strikes have continued in Gaza. The Israeli military controls over half of the enclave in defiance of the ceasefire's terms. According to Gaza's health ministry, Israel has killed at least 936 people since the ceasefire began.
The war did not end. It is a hoax. The war did not end. They're fooling people. Nothing ended. There are martyrs every day. There are martyrs in all places in Gaza every day. What war ended? The war ended from one side only.
There is no safety in Gaza. Wherever you go, you find hits, people dead. There is no area in Gaza that is safe. Every day they fire at us from there and strike us with missiles. It's futile. There is no safety. The war did not stop.
In the United Nations, a Palestinian ambassador called on U.S. President Donald Trump to stop Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in his tracks. The UN geopolitical bloc Arab group joined the ambassador to express deep alarm and visual solidarity against rapidly escalating Israeli settler aggression and military violence against Palestinians.
I know that President Trump is capable and he has the tools to stop Netanyahu in his tracks in order not to keep the whole region in turmoil and wars and occupation, and to move in the direction of peace and justice. That is why the majority of us are working with them.
But Israel has gained new diplomatic ground as it announced that it is opening a new embassy in Slovenia. Israel's foreign minister made the announcement in a post on X, and ties between Israel and Slovenia had soured after the previous center-left government of Robert Golob recognized Palestinian statehood in 2024. It had also characterized Israel's military offensive in Gaza as genocide. However, Israel is eyeing to rebuild its ties after the election of Conservative Prime Minister Janis Jansa. Russian President's envoy Kirill Dmitriev has said that the country will sign an agreement with US on the construction of a tunnel across the Bering Strait.
Now, the aim of this project is joint resource exploration and is a concept that has floated for centuries. The proposal first came from Russia's end last year, ahead of a meeting that was planned to take place between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart in Hungary. Now, however, the meeting never happened. It was canceled days after being announced in October 2025.
Stretching between Alaska and Russia's Siberia region, the Bering Strait is a narrow, strategically important waterway separating the North American and Eurasian continents by just about 55 miles.
Reports suggest that it was Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev himself who put forth this connectivity project. A tunnel beneath Bering Strait would not only create the first direct land connection between the United States and Russia, but also establish a historic transcontinental link between the Western Hemisphere and Asia.
The project envisions an $8 billion investment funded by Moscow and international partners to construct a 70-mile rail and cargo link within 8 years. However, there are several challenges to this proposed project, such as challenging terrain and harsh weather conditions.
Taiwan is rapidly expanding its military deterrence as tensions with China continue to simmer.
According to reports, the island is now set to more than double its anti-ship missile arsenal by 2029, aiming to create a formidable defense shield capable of targeting any blockade or invasion attempt by Beijing. Taiwan is reportedly ramping up its military firepower with plans to increase its anti-ship missile arsenal to more than 1,800 weapons by early 2029. The move comes as Taipei seeks to strengthen its ability to deter a potential blockade or invasion by China, which continues to claim the self-governed island as its own territory.
According to the Reuters, which compiled from defense data and official documents, estimates Taiwan's growing arsenal will include a mix of U.S.-supplied Harpoon missiles and domestically produced Xiongfeng anti-ship missiles.
These weapons can be launched from aircraft, naval vessels, and ground-based systems, giving Taiwan multiple options to strike hostile ships that are operating in the Taiwan Strait.
The missile buildup forms a key part of Taiwan's asymmetric warfare strategy, a doctrine designed to counter China's overwhelming military advantage with a large number of mobile, cost-effective, and highly lethal weapons. Military planners believe such systems could survive an initial wave of Chinese missile and airstrikes and still remain capable of targeting invasion fleets or blockading forces.
Now, Taipei is also pushing for additional U.S. military support, with a new arms package reportedly worth up to $14 billion awaiting approval from President Donald Trump.
At the same time, Taiwan's parliament has cleared additional defense spending to procure more precision-guided munitions capable of striking Chinese forces and staging areas along the mainland coast.
As Beijing continues to increase military pressure around the island, Taiwan is betting that a larger missile arsenal and a robust defense network will strengthen deterrence and raise the cost of any future conflict across the Taiwan Strait. Across the globe, people held candlelight vigils to mark the 37th anniversary of the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown.
Now, the gatherings honored pro-democracy protesters who were killed when Chinese troops and tanks entered Beijing and opened fire on demonstrators. Memorial events took place in several cities, with participants lighting candles and paying tribute to the victims. Here's a report on it. Take a look.
I believe that it's important that everyone continues to celebrate and commemorate the spirit of Tiananmen, of the students' uprising and their passion for democracy and human rights, especially as we face geopolitical tension and threats of our own here. And so that's why we should be commemorating this every year.
It is a shame and absurd that one person holding a single flower could attract so much attention from reporters and police. This matter itself is absurd. It was just a very ordinary activity. Why are you chasing me away? I'm already preparing to leave.
A major political crisis is unfolding in India's eastern state of West Bengal.
Former Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee-led Trinamool Congress party appears to be on the brink of a collapse, nearly a month after suffering a major blow in the West Bengal Assembly elections held in April. Fault lines are emerging within the party, with reports suggesting at least 20 TMC MPs are mulling to quit the party.
Meanwhile, the National Investigation Agency has raided 9 locations, including the residence and office of a former TMC MLA. This is in connection with a probe into a bomb blast in Bangalore ahead of the state elections, which claimed 1 life.
This comes after expelled TMC MLA Rita Brata Banerjee was appointed leader of opposition in the state assembly. Nearly 60 MPs submitted a letter of support to Assembly Speaker, backing her in a move aimed at cementing the faction's claim to be recognized as the party's real legislative wing.
Earlier, Abhishek Banerjee, the party's National General Secretary and Diamond Harbour MP, had written to the Speaker proposing TMC MLA Shobhandev Chattopadhyay as the LOP. However, the proposal was not accepted following allegations of forged signatures of several Trinamool Congress MLAs.
The party's internal crisis further deepened amid a slew of resignations by party leaders, many of whom were long regarded as loyalists of party chief Mamata Banerjee. In the latest, Vidhan Nagar Municipal Corporation Mayor Krishna Chakraborty has resigned from her post, citing personal reasons. This comes just a day after Kolkata Municipal Corporation Mayor and Mamata loyalist Firhad Hakim resigned from his official position.
TMC, a party Mamata Banerjee built from scratch, is undergoing a major shift, with its leadership facing its toughest challenge after suffering an electoral defeat on May 4th.
India Trinamool Congress rose to power in West Bengal in 2011, governing the state for 15 years. The party was helmed by Mamata Banerjee after breaking away from the Indian National Congress in January 1998. Mamata herself began her political career in the 1970s as a youth Congress worker. In 1984, she became one of India's youngest members of parliament by winning a seat in the Lok Sabha from Jadavpur. She served as the 8th Chief Minister of West Bengal till May 2026.
What began as a promising political journey now appears headed for a bleak future, with top leaders breaking ranks. Earlier Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary alleged that the BJP, which is now in power, is replicating Maharashtra's Shiv Sena playbook, in which the party was split into two. The question is, will the same now happen with the TMC?
The United States economy is the largest in the world, but what exactly powers it?
Well, new data from America's Bureau of Economic Analysis gives us a clear picture. In this next report, we decode how a $31 trillion economy breaks down. Take a look.
The total US GDP in 2025 stood at $31.4 trillion. That is nearly one-fourth of the entire global economy. So where does that money come from? The answer is simple. America's biggest industries by economic output and their contribution to GDP gives a clear picture. The services sector dominates. Services producing industries account for a massive 73% of US GDP. And leading all sectors by a significant margin is finance and real estate. Those sectors contributed $6.8 trillion. That is more than one-fifth of the entire US economy on its own. Think about that for a moment. Banks, insurance companies, landlords and investment firms together form America's single biggest economic engine. Coming in second is professional services, and that includes lawyers, consultants, tech firms. The sector added $4.1 trillion, or about 13% of GDP. Healthcare and education come third at $2.8 trillion. Now, what about making things? Manufacturing remains a force. It contributed $3 trillion, or nearly 10% of GDP. But it still sits well behind the services giants. Construction added $1.3 trillion, mining just $371 billion, agriculture only $262 billion, less than 1% of the economy. The takeaway is clear. America does not primarily build or grow things anymore. It finances, advises, trades and trades information. The government sector, federal, state and local combined, contributed $3.3 trillion, or about 11%. This is the modern American economy. Services first, finance-led and worth $31.4 trillion. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Thailand's consumer watchdog has said its plans to sue Facebook, accusing the platform of allowing scammers to defraud users through advertisements.
The watchdog said the company failed to adequately protect consumers from online fraud. Thailand's Consumer Council said it will file a civil lawsuit against Meta on June 8th, and the case centers on allegations that Facebook allowed fraudulent advertisements to remain on its platform, enabling scammers to target users.
The council said it recorded nearly 3,800 complaints linked to Facebook between 2024 and 2026. The complaints included cases where customers did not receive goods they had paid for, as well as alleged fake investment schemes. The watchdog also cited cases of impersonation where scammers allegedly used victims' names and photographs to mislead others.
According to the council, it has spent more than a year attempting to contact Facebook's parent Meta Platforms, urging the company to remove fraudulent advertisements. Thailand has around 51 million Facebook users, making it one of the platform's largest markets in Southeast Asia. The country's Consumer Council said the lawsuit is intended to improve consumer protection standards on digital platforms, and that the case is based on both legal and ethical concerns about Facebook's role in allowing fraudulent activities to continue. The planned lawsuit comes as governments around the world increase scrutiny of social media platforms and their role in combating online fraud and other cross-border crimes.
Meta has previously said it invests in tools to detect and remove scam content and works with regulators and law enforcement agencies to prevent misuse of its platforms.
The FIFA World Cup creates several memories that last a lifetime.
Central to this thrill of the competition is the theme of the underdog claiming a huge victory. Let's take a look at the greatest upsets in World Cup history in no particular order. The ultimate David versus Goliath story happened in the last World Cup itself, and it actually featured eventual champions Argentina. Lionel Messi's side were in fact on a 36-match unbeaten streak coming into the tournament, and they were defeated by Saudi Arabia in their opening match of the 2022 World Cup. However, it turned out to be a wake-up call as Argentina then stormed through the tournament to claim the biggest prize in football.
Now, back in 2002, France entered the tournament as both world and European champions, boasting the likes of Zinedine Zidane. But Senegal stunned the star-studded French side and claimed a 1-0 victory in Seoul, setting the tone for a thrilling tournament. The French team struggled and were knocked out in the group stages.
Let's go back to 1990 for another upset orchestrated by an African team. In the opening match of the tournament at the iconic San Siro in Milan, Cameroon stunned Diego Maradona's Argentina, who were the defending champions. The indomitable Lions, of course, beat Argentina 1-0, despite being reduced to 9 men by the end of the game. Well, the victory put African football on the map, and Cameroon eventually reached the quarterfinals, while Argentina lost to Germany in the final.
Taking you back to 1950 now, England were favourites to win the entire tournament, but they fell to a defeat to a US team which featured part-timers who were far from professional footballers. In fact, the American team had a mailman, dishwasher, and hearsay driver, while the England squad included superstars like Stanley Matthews and Tom Finney. But the result was a 1-0 victory to the US, and it remains a match that is spoken about even after 75 years.
Now, for decades, be it via visual effects or deeply personal biopics, filmmakers have repeatedly succeeded where policy papers often fail.
By weaving environmental themes into gripping narratives, a distinct catalogue of films has managed to alert and awaken global audiences to the precarious state of our planet. Released at the turn of the millennium, Erin Brockovich demonstrated that environmental crises are fundamentally human crises. Based on a true story, the Julia Roberts starrer followed a tenacious legal clerk who uncovered a massive corporate cover-up regarding the contamination of a local water supply with carcinogenic hexavalent chromium.
Next up, The Day After Tomorrow made a similar impact. It took a vastly different approach to ecological messaging. The narrative envisioned the catastrophic disruption of the North Atlantic Ocean circulation, triggering a sudden and devastating global ice age.
James Cameron's groundbreaking film, Avatar, transported audiences to the lush, biodiverse moon of Pandora. All the while boasting of high VFX, the movie was largely a critique of human greed.
Filmmaker Christopher Nolan's Interstellar approached environmental collapse not as a sudden disaster, but as a slow, choking reality. The narrative is rooted in a dystopian future where a global crop blight and severe dust storms have left humanity on the brink of starvation, forcing them to desperately seek a wormhole to find a new home.
Directed by Neela Madhav Panda, the 2017 Indian film Karvi Hawa is a critically acclaimed work that tackles drought, climate change and the agrarian crisis in rural India. The film contrasts two sides of India, the drought-ridden west that push farmers into debt and the flood-ridden eastern side which lead to a widespread loss of life.
Then in 2019, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind offered a deeply moving, grounded look at how changing weather patterns devastate subsistence communities. Based on true story set in Malawi, the narrative follows a young boy whose village is struck by a severe drought and subsequent famine.
Don't Look Up is another satirical dark comedy. It captured the modern frustration of the scientific community, the narrative of two astronomers desperately trying to warn a media-obsessed, politically polarized world about an approaching planet-destroying comet served as an undisguised allegory for the global response to the climate crisis.
The Obama Presidential Center in Chicago is slated to open to the public on 19th of June, complete with the museum which reflects on the early life and political career of former U.S. President Barack Obama. We leave you with that. Do stay tuned. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching Beyond What Is One.
At a time when there's so much kind of toxicity in the air, this kind of breathes new hope as like the permanent home for hope, where you can come here and be inspired and hope again. And not just hope, but take action.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime,